If you got to interact with our healthcare system, our insurance system in any way, know that nobody gives a more about you than you. And you got to advocate for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you.
Welcome to Healthcare Liberty Labs with Tiffany Ryder, where we teach you what they don't want you to know about healthcare.
So I have been wanting to have you on here for quite some time now, and I'm excited that it finally worked out. I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I assume there will be some discussion of opioids and cocaine.
Hell yeah.
And, among other things.
It's not a party if we don't talk about that.
I think so. I think that might be true in this case. But tell me a little bit about what you're doing in the space and where you came from and anything you think we might need
for sure.
Have this convo.
So I fell ass backwards into the insurance space about 10 years ago while I was running grain elevators in rural South Carolina. Started at a carrier and then moved into the startup world. And today I support vendors and brokerages in the space as like a fractional go-to-market executive and do a ton of sales training and coaching for brokerages and for those point solutions vendors as well.
So my first question maybe isn't the smartest question, but how do you get away with that? Brokerages and insurance all sounds like a very buttoned up space to be in, not like a backwards hat tattoo space to be in. So how do you get to be you?
I have to find the right clients for me. So as you can imagine, most of my career, I had to dress nice and look like an asshole like you do, but it's very much not me. And the way I think about it now is that if you don't like my backwards hat, you're really not going to like the prospecting strategies I'm going to teach you. So we might as well not work together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's, I was I don't like to plan podcasts too much, but I was thinking through what are the coolest aspects that I think would really bring value to people to hear about. And honestly, I think that's one of the things that I admire most about you, just following you on social and whatever, is you have a way of really attracting people who are going to like who you really are. And I think that's a space that a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle to get into.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't start being authentic on purpose. When I left a big Fortune 500 carrier that I worked for, I thought I was real hot shit and a really good sales guy. And I went to a startup and found out, oh, my brand, the brand of the company I worked for was kind of carrying me a little bit.
Yeah.
So this was in late 2020. So right in COVID, I was used to flying to the central US to meet with brokers and make them buy my stuff. Wasn't doing that anymore. Figured I'll give this social media thing a try. And I was attracting no one, dude, because I was trying to play both sides. So that I could never alienate a potential customer. Yeah. And it wasn't until I started posting some of my really authentic stuff about drug addiction and getting diddled and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That people really started to gravitate toward me and actually do business with me. And so what I kind of adopted was this idea that I'm going to be super authentic and myself on social media. And I'm going to let people that I would hate working with, who would hate working with me, I'm going to let them self-select out.
Wise, man. And I have to go back though, right? Because there's gotta be I think a lot of us, go through this, they call it the spotlight effect in psychology, where you assume you put something out on social media and then everyone that you've ever known or your grandmother's ever known is going to read it and care. When it turns out nobody actually cares because everybody's worried about, what you think about them.
Yeah.
But still, right? I can't imagine sitting in your living room at your dinner table the night before and you look over at your wife and you're like, hey, so sales aren't so great. I'm thinking about putting my addiction history on the internet. That feels It feels incredibly vulnerable, like a really difficult step to take. Like, how did you even get there?
So first, I didn't ask anyone around me if it was a good idea, which was
Okay.
like really dumb, right? I was just like, I was in desperation mode, dude. Like
Okay.
I was sending all these terrible, spammy, pitch slappy DMs on LinkedIn, creating this dumb content that no one cared about. And so I was just like, okay, nothing is working. I'm at this startup. I don't have the luxury of like figuring it out. I've got to start getting sales. So I need to just try something. And that's what I tried.
Wow, right? Like, and I think like what a testament to desperation and how it molds us into the
Yeah.
people we need to be. And well, like what was the response like? Were people like, "Hey man, are you okay?"
No,
Like,
actually, the first time I like posted about addiction and alcoholism on the internet, people in my target market, like people I wanted to sell to, were the first people to reach out. But they didn't reach out to me and say, Sims, you're so authentic. Want to do business with you, bro. They reached out to me, and some people said, dude, I've been struggling with this for a long time. Can I
mm,
talk to you about it? Other people are like, hey, you know, I have this in my family. And it was just like a very human connection point. And I was, you know, it didn't drive a ton of revenue immediately, but it was like this way for me when I couldn't be in real life with other people to foster a real meaningful connection.
yeah. I have another friend now, but started off as a professional acquaintance of someone that I had met on LinkedIn, and he told me one time, he said, you know, the man with the least secrets, or the man with no secrets, has the most power. And also like found himself like creating a podcast about like some childhood sexual
Mm-hmm.
abuse and stuff that he'd gone through, and had a similar experience. But I just think it's such an act of almost bravery to just be ourselves and then be like, hey, this is the screwed up version of me. Like, do you want to hang out?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It can't be easy, man.
I mean, it is and it isn't, right? Like at this point, I've talked about all of my demons on the internet enough that it's not scary to hit post. It still feels like vulnerable to talk about some of the bad things that have happened to me, but it's also a really healing exercise to write about my trauma. And so it's like an added bonus that it helps other people feel seen and heard and helps me connect with other people. But in a lot of ways, it's like having a journal. Like
Yeah.
I'm just dumping all this stuff out of my brain so that I don't have to live with it alone.
Have you had like, you know, when I talk to people, because I've done something similar, but to a much lesser degree, right? Talking about just some of the horrifying, traumatic stuff that you see practicing clinical
Mm-hmm.
medicine. And like, that's actually how I ended up on social media, was just like entering into the space and being like, I'm dying in the following ways. Does anybody else hear me? Um, but in that space, like, people will say, you know, oh, you know, well, are you going to get fired? Are you worried that you're going to get fired? Are you worried that people aren't going to be friends with you? Are you worried about this or that or whatever? And so, like, I had like all of these stories that I had told myself before I started posting about like what the worst thing that could happen to me was. And, you know, I'd never get a job because people were going to read some post about me,
Yeah.
you know, being suicidal and hoping to not wake up, or, you know, something. Um, did any of those bad things, like, have you ever had any negative part of that come true? What does that look like?
Yes. Yes. So I think the bolder you get in sharing, like you mentioned, suicidal ideation,
Yeah.
like addiction, that kind of like really taboo topics that we should all talk about, by the way, but that we're told we shouldn't. I'm not going to name either of these employers, but I was an executive at a private equity backed company, and I was only there for a couple of months because it was a bad fit. But
Mhm.
I would get a call from the president of the company multiple times a week because board members would read my stuff and they didn't like it. And then I was working for a different company, big publicly traded company, and I had to have conversations with HR almost weekly
Oh,
about my
wow.
LinkedIn activity.
Did you ever consider stopping?
No, hell no. Absolutely not. Because like this big company I'm talking about, I was crushing it for them. Like the last thing they should have been worried about is what I'm talking about online. They should have been worried about trying to make sure I didn't leave, which I did.
Yeah.
But the reason that I never thought about stopping is that I knew, like, I've been fired before. I've worked at a lot of different places. I know that nowhere is safe, right? There's no such thing as job security. But I knew that one of the major keys to my marketability as like a new hire for another company was my LinkedIn. And I knew that like the way that I drive revenue, LinkedIn is a key component of that. And
Yeah.
I don't own my audience on LinkedIn, right? But it's something that I built. And so it's something I'm not willing to let a company tell me that I can't have. And luckily now I don't have to do that.
There's a lot of parallels in what you're saying, just in corporate culture and medicine, I think. Meaning like none of us think that we're being sort of groomed and put in these boxes, but essentially, right? Like you grow up, you're in grade school, you're in high school, you're whatever. And then, when you're looking at like, oh, what do I want to be when I grow up? Like, I feel like one of the questions that most of us ask is, well, do I want to start a company and do something risky?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I want to be safe? Right? Like those are sort of like two ends of the spectrum. And I mean, at least in my experience, and it sounds like your experience, sort of supports that as well. Like it's almost like those are flipped, right? Like you think of entrepreneurship as being the risky play and, working in a hospital or working for an insurance firm as being, the safe bet. But it turns out that if you want to actually be who you are, then that's never the way that plays out.
No, it isn't. And like today, you can be a top performer in sales at a company and do nothing wrong. And I've seen this happen to many friends of mine. And just because new leadership comes in or because the company doesn't want to pay out all your commission, you just get fired. And it's always been really hard for me to come to terms with that in my brain, that you can do literally everything right and just get chopped for no reason.
I hear you. I went to an event last year and like saw something that I knew was going to be, covered in the news the next day. And I'm attending the event and I was like, this was like so tame and so boring. There isn't really a lot that happened here. I thought there was going to be a big to do about it in the media, but I guess not, right? And then, I go to bed, I wake up the next day and the New York Times and, every major media outlet, had this contrived made up story. And the like take home message that I got from that was like, it doesn't even matter if what you're doing is being televised by 20 different cameras, right? Like the story that people want to tell about you because you're bringing in too much commission or you're too pretty or you're too good at whatever it is that you're doing, it's just completely subjective. And there's nothing you can do about it.
No, there's not. And I think that that's why people like me and you have gravitated to places that allow us to control the narrative.
Yeah.
And because we at least try to do it as authentically as possible, our audiences trust it.
Yeah. Like it or hate it, at least they know what it is.
Yeah, for sure. And make no mistake about it, there are lots of people that don't like what I do on the internet and they like to tell me about it. and that's fine.
I'm sure they do. Speaking of things that people won't like, one of the things that I personally, as a emergency medicine specialist, think is most interesting about your presentation is that you are willing to openly talk about your history of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, for maybe people who are listening who have never heard your story, how did you end up addicted? What was your drug of choice? How'd you get there? How'd you get
Yeah.
out? Did you get out? What does that look like?
Yeah. We'll tell the abridged version. So I had some not so cool stuff happen to me when I was little, at the hands of a family member, a babysitter, and eventually a church leader. So, really pretty kid. What can I say? Too dark.
I'm not sure. It's I'm not sure where to go with that one.
The abridged version is that I got abused by a family member when I was very young. I repressed the memories, didn't have them for quite a long time. But I always wanted to numb my brain. So I was 13. I started drinking, experiment with drugs, that sort of thing, and had periods between the ages of 13 and 18 where I didn't drink or didn't do drugs, but I always kind of came back to it. And in college, I was a party animal. I was a drug dealer. I was a bar musician. I had a lot of fun.
You were popular. Is that what I heard?
Sure. The guy with the good stuff in his pocket is always popular.
Yeah.
And I was always it didn't matter what night of the week it was. I was always the guy that was going to go out with you. And that ultimately led to me getting kicked out of the Georgia Institute of Technology twice. And the second time they asked me to never come back again. So I ended up at a little school in South Carolina called Presbyterian College. And I'll never forget the moment I was sitting in the parking lot of my dorm and these horrible memories of what had happened to me as a kid started flooding back to me. And I immediately, first thing I did, called my dealer, bought an 8-ball of blow, went and bought a case of beer, called all my buddies and was like, hey, we're getting fucked up. Let's go have fun. But I was really just obviously hiding from this pain and this trauma, right? So I continue to party. I get out of college. I'm still doing a lot of drugs, drinking a lot, but I start going to therapy and I start taking antidepressants again and try to start working through this trauma. Not really working. So I keep partying. In the midst of all this, I told you I worked a grain elevator before I got an insurance. I've done ag work, farm work a lot coming up, and I have a chronic back injury as a result of it. So go to a new doctor here in Columbia, South Carolina. I tell him pretty honestly about how I party. I'm not like I drink 10 drinks a night, but I'm like, I get tore up from time to time. And this dude puts me on 120 Vicodin a month and 30 Flexeril a month. So for those of you out there that aren't good at math like me, that's 4 Vicodin a day, 1 Flexeril a day. Plus, I drink a lot and do lots of recreational drugs. So as you can imagine, Tiffany, I got addicted to Vicodin pretty quick, was taking it a lot. So my come to Jesus with that is my mother-in-law was a nurse for 40 years. And she saw me come out of the bathroom at her house one time and my eyes were glazed over and she just asked me point blank what kind of drugs I was doing. And I was like, well, I'm not I'm not doing drugs. These are a prescription. I've got a back injury. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So that kind of set off the chain reaction for me to eventually kick Vicodin. But I just ramped up my drinking and the rest of my partying. The way I quit cocaine was I was at a wedding with my wife for a very prominent local family, and my wife rounded a corner and I was doing key bumps with one of my friends out in the open. And she's just like, look, we're done if you don't stop this.
Yeah.
So I put that down too. And so then all I have left is booze. And I go in on it hard, harder than I ever have. And that all came to a head 6.5 years ago. I was playing a gig at a bar in the North Georgia mountains, having a good time. I blacked out while I was playing the gig. And I came to in my truck, like by a boat ramp on the edge of the lake in the wee hours of the morning, lit cigarette in my hand, beer in the passenger seat. No idea how I got there. And I've done much worse stuff than that when I've been tore up. But that was just the moment. I was like, I'm going to drink the rest of this beer and I'm never going to have one again because I can't. Because I'm going to ruin my life. I'm going to ruin somebody else's. And so I called my wife on my way home and said, I'm done. And she's like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'll stop drinking with you, at least for a little while. And that was October 25th of 2018. And so I haven't had a drink since then. And I got sober from cocaine and opioids about a year prior to that.
Wow.
And I've had the good fortune to not relapse on either of those either.
Yeah, this the story, that you tell about you went to the doctor, you went to someone you trusted. Is that your primary care doctor?
Yeah, it was my primary care.
Yeah, went to a primary care doctor, and this was the prescription. Like, it makes you wonder, like, how many people end up in that situation. Like, I know that, we're taught, like, oh, surgeons 20 years ago, used to prescribe too much medication, too much pain medicine. That's how people got hooked. Or, we're even in medicine, like, you're taught, well, it's not really your problem. Like, you need to be careful, but it's really the drug seekers' problem. It's really like these bad people who just want to be high, and they're, even though that's the story you're being told, and you also know that patients come in. I practiced in the emergency room, and so it's like patients come in withdrawal from these medications, and they're not looking for a good time, right? Like, they describe, like, they feel like there are razor blades cutting them all over
Yeah.
their bodies. They feel like they've never been in so much pain before. And it has nothing to do with whatever the original injury was. And I don't even know that I've ever met anyone who's gotten addicted to these drugs without having been prescribed them by a doctor. How old were you when that happened?
22.
22.
When I got prescribed all that.
Do you ever remember, like, do you remember the doctor, like, telling you, like, oh, you can only take this for 2 weeks, or you
No,
should be really
dude.
careful?
No. So I'll tell you the few of the things that bother me about it in hindsight. One, physical therapy was never brought up. Like, there were no options presented to me besides, here's some drugs. And this cat, I don't know if you can still do this anymore, but this cat would give me 3 prescriptions when I walk out of his office, a 90-day every time. I mean, I was on these for probably 2 years, something like that.
Mm.
And it sucks because the meds really only helped my back pain for like a couple weeks. Then they didn't help the pain anymore. I still had it. And they didn't really get me high anymore. But if I
Yeah.
didn't take them, I felt like I was going to die.
Yeah. Like, none of these are uncommon things. Nothing you're saying is surprising, or even, like, on the radar of outside of, like, what I look at as a normal experience, and
Mhm.
what we know from the pharmacology, from, like, the science of the way these drugs work, that we should expect. What's interesting to me is that I didn't practice medicine 40 years ago, right? Like,
Yeah.
literally, like, I was working full time, overtime in the emergency room a year ago. Um, And even now, like, yeah, do I know, is there messaging around long-term use of these drugs? Sure. But people are still doing it, right? Like, and I don't mean like drug seekers. I mean, doctors are still prescribing long-term courses of opioids, which in some cases may very well be important in a treatment regimen. Maybe there is no other option. Maybe it is justified, but I think that there's a large group of people that are still sort of ending up on this merry-go-round and never really received proper informed consent, and that's a problem.
It's a huge problem because, I mean, look, I'm a 22-year-old party animal, and this guy's telling me he's going to give me codeine. I'm like, hell yes.
Yeah,
Like, what does he think I'm going to do? Say,
yeah,
no, doc, I'd really love to talk about those physical therapy options instead of this. It's like, I don't think this guy had malicious intent, but I believe it was incumbent on him as a healthcare professional to show me all of my options and to tell me, hey, bro, these are going to help you, but here's what you should expect. Also, these are incredibly addictive. And if we keep you on them for any length of time, you're going to have a very hard time getting off of them.
and there's no alternative, right? So, like, what young, and I'm going to pick on you, right? But when I think of a young 22-year-old, like, they're automatically like, oh, bro, that bad thing, that's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Like all these other weak people who can't handle their booze or their drugs or their whatever, right? But like you really like, you have a 22-year-old, you're going to give a controlled substance. Like the conversation needs to be like, you're not the exception. You're not special. Let me tell you the predictable outcome of this. You're getting 3 days worth of medication, and that's how long you have to do whatever the next step is, because
Yeah.
there is no more, right? And as the adult in the room, the doctor should have had that conversation, right? Like,
Yeah, 100%. He
seems
should have.
clear. But I think another story that you told me recently like highlights the same damn thing. It's the same dysfunction, it's the same gap in understanding, but if you don't mind sharing, your experiences that you had with SSRIs,
Mm-hmm.
a super commonly prescribed drug that a lot of America is on, and that is often impossible to come off of. If you don't mind just sharing that, I think
Yeah.
that speaks to this.
So I've been on quite a few SSRIs, SNRIs over the years, beginning when I was about 17 or 18. And this is before I was aware of the trauma I'd been through. So my diagnoses were like generalized anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. Um, and for those watching at home, my real diagnosis is complex PTSD from the trauma I experienced, and it shows up in a lot of different ways. Important context though, because really these like psychiatrists I'm meeting with, they're throwing medicine at the symptoms, right? We don't know what the underlying cause is yet. So as SSRIs go, they become ineffective in certain people after certain amounts of time. So I would switch to a new one. And then maybe one of them would keep my dick from getting hard. And I didn't like that. So I'd switch to a new one. And then maybe one of them made me think about killing myself all the time. So I'd switch to a new one, right? So this happens over the course of many years. When my first son, Jack, was born a little over 3 years ago, I had a goal of getting off of my medication because my medication made me so sleepy all the time. I
Mm.
was I was consuming about 500 milligrams of caffeine a day to just like not fall asleep at my desk. And I knew I was going to be sleep deprived with this little baby coming to the world, so I wanted to do it. So I tried to come off, tapered down, not even all the way, um, and had a suicidal ideation episode where I had to go to my GP's office, and I was
Mm.
just like, something bad's going to happen. if you don't take care of me. Luckily, they didn't take me to a behavioral health center and put a hold on me. They like listened to me, got me calmed down, switched my meds, and I was okay. And my doctor was like, "You're not coming off of these because this is what happens when you do." So fast forward, my second son born 18 months ago, 17, 18 months ago. I tried to do it again. My doctor's like, "We went through this already. You're not doing that." And this is a big hospital system, primary care doc. So I try to do it again. I'm on Cymbalta at this point, duloxetine, which is the hardest antidepressant to detox from, I believe, because of its half-life. Anyway, go through the same song and dance, actually plan out my suicide this time, and only don't go through with it because my 3-year-old gets severely sick. I have to stay up with him all night, take care of him. So go back on antidepressants. Finally, I switched to a direct primary care physician months and months and months ago. And in my intake, when I was meeting with her, I said, "Look, one of my major goals for myself is to be pharmaceutical free. I want to manage my chronic pain. I want to manage my mental health, if I have to, with plant medicine, with something that grows in the earth. I don't want to be on pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life." So she's like, "Look, Sims, I'm supportive of you. I will sign off on a plan if you create it, but I need you to know there's no approved taper method way for you to get off of this drug. So you're going to have to do some research on your own. You're going to have to figure it out." So I'm on, I think, 90 milligrams, 60 or 90, something like that. And I start tapering down. But when you get down to 20 milligrams, they don't make pills with less milligrams of duloxetine in them than that. And these are capsules that have the little beads inside of them. So you got to break those little suckers apart, dump the beads out, get some tweezers, pop the beads you need back in. So I do all this over the course of a couple of months, finally taper down to 0. And then I'm in for hell on earth for about 6 weeks while I wait for this stuff to fully get out of my system. So I, like very violent mood swings, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, couldn't sleep, couldn't control my body temperature, dealt with a lot of suicidal ideation during that time too. But I was resolute. I was like, I'm not going back to this. So I got through the 6 weeks and my symptoms started to subside. Didn't have brain zaps anymore. Didn't have the horrible fatigue, the mood swings. And I started feeling more like, I guess, myself. I haven't been a fully sober person off meds since, in 15 years.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I think this is me. And that was 5 months ago that I fully tapered down. So today I'm able to live pharmaceutical free.
Wow. Before you started taking the SSRIs or the SNRIs, had anyone ever mentioned to you that maybe when you decided it was time to come off of them, or you'd had enough therapy or whatever, that this withdrawal syndrome or this discontinuation syndrome was even a thing? Was that part of your consent process?
No, it wasn't. Me and you have talked about this before. Like, no one ever talked to me about getting off of the meds. Like, whether it was said directly or not, the kind of prevailing theme was, Sims, your brain is messed up, right? And these medicines are going to help you not feel so messed up, and you're just going to stay on those. And I even had a conversation with my therapist, who I will not name because she could probably get in trouble for saying this, but like, I talked to her about this because she's the one like really supporting my mental health and my emotional state
Sure.
as I'm tapering off.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what? like, why the hell isn't there an approved method for tapering off of these?
Yeah.
And what she said to me was, Sims, I don't know when in the last 10, 20 years this has happened, but in the mental health community, we have moved from episodic treatment with medication to like lifetime medication. And that's a scary thing because for me, I was a kid when I got on these medicines. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, they helped me for quite a long time, and I would credit with them in some way for keeping me alive to this point today.
Yep.
But I never agreed to be on these medicines for the rest of my life, and I didn't think that that's what I was doing. I thought I was tackling a big problem I was having in the short term.
This episode brought to you by Crowd Health. Crowd Health helps you find awesome doctors, negotiate your bills, and fund those bills through our peer-to-peer funding platform for less. Welcome to an easier way to pay for healthcare.
It's almost like if you just take away the awareness that episodic treatment is even a thing, right? If you just create a culture where, well, all of your friends are on some sort of antidepressant, all of your friends are on like reflux, like antacid medication, or whatever it is, then everybody's on blood pressure medicine. Then you never have to have the conversation, and and I think this is, of all the things in healthcare that really like hurt me and made me feel so just desperate and unfulfilled, and like part of the problem, like someone who is hurting people. This is it. There is
Yeah.
no effort at deprescribing. I see no effort at deprescribing. And again, I'm not trying to demonize doctors or whatever. But when do we stand up and when do we say, I don't care if I lose my job, but I can't treat this 22-year-old man with chronic pain and depression and anxiety in 7 minutes. And I'm not willing to ruin his life and put him on medications that he has to be on for the rest of his life and not do my due diligence or, give proper informed consent. I'm just not willing to do it. And I think, you mentioned, and I want to get into this a little bit, but you mentioned your DPC doc, your direct primary care doc. And I want to hear you, and your thoughts about industry perspectives on, private care, these private practices. But like that to me is the middle finger to these corporate entities, right? That says, we get that, United Healthcare was hacked, or whoever it was, Change Healthcare, whoever it was, not picking on anybody, right? But, we know that you were hacked and you couldn't pay private practices for months on end. And, practices went $60,000 a month into debt. And then you offered them $3,000 loans or, whatever the details were of that situation. I'm not entirely clear. But then when, I couldn't pay my patient or my employees and my practice was going under, you graciously offered to buy me when I had told you there was zero interest in that. Right? Like these games of consolidation, whether they're intentional or just happy coincidences, will take down the system. They will provide a system that has no other options. But DPC is one of the few highlights in this whole game of fuckery that I see.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So tell me, do you know, what do you see as far as like industry trends or like, do you think that DPC really has the chance not to fix everything immediately, but to come in there and disrupt things? And let's start with what it is exactly.
Yeah, I do think it has the chance to do that because I've seen what it's done for me and I've seen what it's done in employer groups where some of the good benefits consultants in our business have placed DPC-led plans instead of big insurance plans. But I think it starts with, like, we can explain what a DPC is. So direct primary care physician, independent physician, don't work inside a hospital system. Some of them take insurance. Most of them prefer not to, but it's like a subscription fee. So like for my DPC, I pay her like $100 a month. I get unlimited access to her via text, via an app. And like the last time I needed to see her, I was having like flu-like symptoms, really, really bad flu-like symptoms. I texted her at like 8 in the morning. Literally 15 minutes later, she texted me back and said, I'm clearing an hour for you this afternoon at 1:00. Be at my office. Simple as that. Okay. So there is no waiting in a waiting room just for an hour to be seen by your physician for 7 minutes, right? She, instead of focusing on treating as many patients as possible, because that's what hospital systems make clinicians do, she has a finite number of patients that all pay her a subscription fee. And so she is incentivized to keep us healthy and out of her office because I pay her that $100 a month. You know, whether I go 15 times or I go 0 times.
When I look at like what individuals can do to move the needle, like DPC is an obvious option. Like you can opt out of playing the game for, I mean, a fraction of what it costs to even meet your deductible.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And like all of them are different, right? Like my DPC isn't licensed to dispense meds. She doesn't run her own labs. So like I'm not on meds anymore, but like when she has to run labs for me, I pay cash for that. But it's also, I'm still not paying an insurance. I'm still paying cash prices, which are, as you know, absolutely a fraction of the cost of what we get charged when we go through insurance. So I still feel good about it. And I actually don't carry insurance at all.
Yeah. Same.
Which is a nice feeling. Uninsured.
It really is a nice feeling. And I know it sounds crazy. But I've just never been happier. And I think that's the reason, is because going back to like where we started with like, well, what's the safe job? Is being a doctor a safe job and being an entrepreneur is a risky job? It's the same, like, it's the same situation in that like being uninsured to me is the less risky option because at least I know what my options are now, right? Like as opposed to insurance where I'm paying, $25,000 a year to have zero idea of how I'm going to get screwed and what's going to be denied or paid or, whatever.
Yeah. 25K buy-in to pay a bunch more money.
To pay a bunch more money. Yeah. I love to argue with my my friends who are, like to they care about me and they want to protect me and they say, well, you need insurance. Like this is like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if something like happens or whatever? And it's like, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I know that I'm going to have $25,000 plus my $14,000 deductible, more money to deal with whatever it was that I would have previously. And I don't know, we ended up signing on with Crowd Health, who is now our sponsor because we love them so much. I know. But we just haven't had any issues. Yeah. We haven't had any issues at all. Everything's been funded that we've needed to fund. We get most of our care through our DPC. And like, I think most people think that primary care is trash because most primary care has trouble really like providing good quality, because I don't care if your doctor is brilliant and a savant, like you can't provide care in 7 minutes.
No.
And so there was really no option. So people are, like I get a lot of grief, like, oh, well, a bunch of primary care offices are just hiring NPs and then they just like refer everybody to a specialist and this and that. And I'm like, look, it's impossible to sort out like who's going to a specialist because your doctor, like, or your NP or whatever, like maybe doesn't know what's going on, but they probably do. They probably just can't bill enough to spend enough time with you to like pay the light bill.
Exactly. And that's a horrible position for all of us to be in. And like I like that a DPC has aligned incentives with me, but I also like that DPCs make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And get to treat a reasonable amount of patients in the right way. Because like people like me that go to a DPC, and I'd imagine you're the same with yours, I would refer anybody to my DPC.
Anybody.
Like, you almost can't get me to stop talking about it.
Yeah. But Sims, I thought that it's only for rich people, I thought.
I guess so. That $100 a month is tough.
I mean,
especially
it's not a
without
small amount of money.
Especially without my insurance premiums.
But it's way smaller, exactly, than your insurance premiums would be, or even, again, like your deductibles. So, all right, we beat that horse to death.
We did.
But I have one more question. Do you think, given your experience, with your DPC so far, like, do you feel like you would have gotten addicted to Vicodin if you had been seeing a DPC in 2018?
I don't think my DPC would have ever even brought up prescription painkillers to me. And I'll tell you why. I convinced my wife to leave her big box doctor to come to my DPC, which she does. Mm-hmm. She, as mothers do, carrying babies around and doing all the stuff, gets really, really, really bad knots behind her shoulder, sometimes to the point where she can't move one of her arms. So that happened to her the other day. She texted our DPC. DPC said, hey, come on over in 30 minutes. I'll take care of you. DPC is licensed in some holistic practice. She just fixed Brienne's shoulder herself on the table with her hands.
Yeah. I love it.
And sent her on her merry way.
Because she doesn't have to worry about what billable code to use or what she has time to do. She can just treat her patient. It's almost like the old school medicine, like that you see on TV, where like the doctor comes in, does the house call, and, and knows how to do all the things.
It is, and I do think that one of the limitations of DPC today, though, is that it is making healthcare more localized again, which I think is a good thing. But obviously, like, there are places in the country that become care deserts as a result of that.
Yes.
But, I mean, I think that's what we're going back to. I mean, I've got a buddy that's a DPC in North Carolina, and he makes house calls, and he loves it.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It's so old school.
We have someone coming on the pod soon who is an EMT paramedic who offers like emergency medicine services in people's homes for things that like normal, like a catheter that's filled up with blood or something like that, that normally the only option they have is to go into the hospital. And they have this whole network of people that are going out to people's homes, hospice patients' homes, and doing the procedures that need to be done right there in the home. And the only reason they can do it, Sims, is because they're a direct care provider.
Right.
It's a subscription service. It's the same thing, right? But when you talk to those people, they say, my mother would have had to go to the emergency department 30 times in the last 6 months. How much does that cost?
And how much time?
Time away from work, emotional, garbage that you get just being in the hospital, infections you pick up in the hospital. Like, it's nuts. I feel like I would be completely depressed and demoralized and just terrified. But this, this direct movement is really pushing forward. It brings me hope. I'm excited about it. I don't think that my DPC doc would have ever prescribed Vicodin like that. I don't think my DPC doc would have prescribed an SSRI without having, more conversations. I think it's two things. I have to be honest, like my clinical brain won't shut up, so I have to just mention it. But it's two things. First off, when you have more time, you can get to the root of the problems, better. You can offer an actual informed consent process with risk and benefit. But right now in 2025, in March of 2025, I think another thing, another differentiator, is the DPC doc is part of that small set of the population who's willing to just say, I'm going to do what's right, even if it sounds scary to me, even if it's risky to me. I'm going to do the non-traditional, out of the box, not status quo thing. And so I almost feel like the direct care people that are doing direct care right now are like the cream of the crop, because it self-selects for the cream of the crop. I don't know if that'll always be true, and that's okay. But it's really I think a safer bet now than it will ever be.
I'm with you. And that's a great thing.
Yep, it really is. All right, man. I know you got places to go, planes to catch, but I appreciate you taking the time to chit chat and hang out. And I look forward to having you on again soon.
Hell yeah. Great to be here. Got
any parting thoughts?
Couple parting thoughts. One, being true to yourself, you're never going to regret it. Even if it feels scary, it's the safest thing to do.
Yeah.
And two, if you got to interact with our healthcare system, our insurance system in any way, know that nobody gives a shit more about you than you. And you got to advocate for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you.
You got to do it. Even if your doctor wants what's best for you, they can't possibly care or know as well as you do.
Exactly.
I love it. All right, man. See you next time.
This has been the Healthcare Liberty Lab. Thank you to our listeners and our sponsor, Crowd Health, for making this possible. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, be it Substack, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or somewhere else. We're glad to have you with us on this mission to rethink healthcare together.